afternoon, everybody. My name is Donna Feazell. I'm your host of Afternoon Drive on IC Radio, in Christ Radio, your source for news and entertainment. You can find us on television. You know you're a TV star now. You can find us on television channel. I'm not, but he is. Channel 182 on Charter Communications, as well as Abundant TV. Abundant TV is found on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and we're getting across all over Europe now. And Rob Patz, who owns Abundant TV, actually got a station in Australia. And so now he's working on a couple other places in Europe as well. So we're real proud to be bringing the message out there. And nobody can do it better than this guy right here. I always love having you on the show. It's always so much fun. Now, you're an attorney and you're a doctor. So he is an attorney and he's a doctor. But before I get started with Bob, I wanted to mention too, coming up very next soon is going to be Chuck and Mary Lynn Bailey with Alabama Fair Tax. Okay, Dr. Attorney Bob French. And so this is my go-to guy. I love history, and so does Bob. And so you've been a scholar your entire life.
Yeah, I suppose so. I think you could say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like we were talking before we got on the air. I really never wanted to leave the university.
My son's the same way. He's still going to college.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. Keep you young, right?
I'm a voracious reader. I have probably, what would you say, 1,000 books in my library.
Oh gosh, yes.
So I read constantly. And yeah, so you could say I'm a scholar. Of course, I had to get out one of my Bibles last evening. She couldn't believe how worn out it was.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway.
But I bet it's a treasure. So you have notes all in your Bible?
Oh, yeah, it's used. I was wanting to find one of the first things I want to talk about is Zacharias.
Mm-hmm.
When you invite me out here for these religious holidays, I always want to tell your audience things they don't know. And Paul Zacharias played an important part in the coming of Christmas because he was the father of John the Baptist. He was Martha's husband. And he was a priest in the temple, which was a tremendous honor. There were 24 groups of priests. There were 6 in a group. The group consisted of, if I can remember my hope, there were 2 who led the prayer, 1 who cleaned the altar after the burning of the stuff. And one of the prize things to do was carry the incense, and that man went barefooted in white robes throughout the temple where the people were worshiping. And the incense represented their prayers to the Lord. Mm-hmm. And let's see, there was one at the court of the Jews, 2 at the court of the Gentiles, and I think 1 at the court of women. Anyway, they would draw lots when they got there, and they would serve for 2 Sabbaths, 8 days. And Zacharias was so fortunate that it was a big honor to be selected to come and do it. Plus you got paid. So he got chosen, his group of 6 from the 24 courses, they called it. And he got chosen to come up and drew lots, and he got the incense burning. Boy, oh boy. So he walked around the temple barefooted in his white robe, saying prayers, encouraging prayer, and so on. And when he finally finished, he went back to where he would leave the incense burner. Mm-hmm. And he's putting it down, straightening things out, and boom, here's an angel. 7 feet high, says, Zacharias, you have been blessed. My name's Gabriel. I am an angel who stays in the presence of the Lord. course, Zacharias was scared to death, so he says, "Don't be afraid. I've come to bring you great news. You're going to have a son." Well, I can't have a
Here
son.
comes.
I'm 90 years old. I can associate with that. Anyway, according to the Quran, he was 99 years old, and Martha was 90. Now, they always blame not having children on the wife because any man could get a woman pregnant. But poor Martha had never had any children, which was a disgrace. And now here's this 7-foot high, sparkling being telling him he's going to be a father. Then my favorite line. He says, "Give me a sign."
Like, okay, you got this 7-foot person here, a being, and you still got to have a sign. We say stuff like that, but we do the same thing.
Well, I'm not saying the angel could get aggravated, but he did react.
Yeah,
He says, "Now, because of your unbelief, you're going to be a mute until that boy is named, and you will name him John. He will never taste alcohol, never smoke." What are we doing here?
Nothing.
Oh,
I'm popular. I get
oh,
texts all the time. People want to be on the show, and they want to be on the birthday club too. So
oh, okay. Well, anyway, he from that point on, he could not say anything until the 8th day after the child was born, and he was circumcised, and they named him. He still couldn't talk, and so the crowd wanted to name him Zacharias after his daddy. And Zacharias got a writing tablet, and their writing tablet was a piece of wood that they put an oil on, and then they had a stick, which we call a stylus, and they would write in the oil. So he wrote, "No, name him John." And so they said, "Well, the child shall be named John." Poof, he's able to talk, able to hear.
important.
Yeah, so, but the funny thing that I think is so funny, after all this stuff, he's in the most holy place in the world, in the temple, just short of the court of priests. 7-foot high angel appears, and he says, "Give me a sign." That's pretty good. I mean, that is so Jewish.
It's so Donna too, because sometimes it's like a house has to fall on me. Sometimes,
That's so funny.
God, is this what you want me to do? And He's giving you all these signs.
Yeah, you got. Today they call it synchronicity, and if you watch your life, you can find synchronicity all the time. Well, anyway, that was the way I wanted to open this conversation because I think it's so funny. And he told him all these things, that John would not live in a community with people. He would never taste alcohol. He'd never do this, never do that. In other words, he would be a Nazarite. Very few, 7 Nazarites in the Bible. Don't ask me to name them. Most famous Nazarite was Samson. Nazarite never cut his hair. Samson got all tied up with his girlfriend. She cut his hair, and that was the end of him.
Don't listen to women.
There you go. I'm telling you. So anyway, he was going to be a Nazarite, which meant he was going to live a hard life, a sanctified life. And of course, we know that John went and lived in the desert. And for a while, there is evidence, not strong evidence, no proof, but there is evidence that he lived at Masada with the Essenes, because the Jews for 160 years, since the Hasmoneans, or we call them the Maccabees, the brothers who kicked the Syrians out of Palestine and led Israel for I think the number was 165 years. Don't hold me to that. But anyway, from that time, when the Roman general Pompey came in after after they lived 165 years, most pleasant time in the history of the Jews. They had no wars. They had good crops. They had milk and honey. They had good clothing. They were making great progress, and they were looking toward their Messiah. Mm-hmm. And they were searching the scriptures. Now, the Pharisees lived among the people, but they studied the Bible every day. That's why they called them teachers of the law. So anyway, it went on, and during this very prosperous period, they were looking for this Messiah. Now, they had a different view of the Messiah than what Jesus turned out to be. They thought the Messiah would give them the strength to rule the world. Which, let me digress just a little bit. The world at that time in the census usually counted somewhere between 80,000 and 120,000 people. Mm-hmm. Now, this is go count them. This is an accurate census. When, and I'm going to talk about Augustus Caesar here in a minute. But when Augustus became emperor, he took a census, and he had about 82,000 people. That made him the largest, most successful ruler in the history of the world. Anyway, let me get back to where we were with these Jews looking for the Messiah. Now, one of the things that gets me is how people can just discount Jesus Christ and Christianity. I mean, you have to be a total fool, an idiot, not to accept Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is these guys sitting around in caves and walking everywhere they went, living simple, they predicted him as early as 2,000 years before he came. Mm-hmm. And when I was researching years ago the city of Bethlehem, how on earth could the city of Bethlehem be the birthplace of the Messiah, i.e., Jesus Christ? How could it? Well, it was predicted. Now, the biblical scholar would say, well, it was the city of David. That's where David was anointed to become king. Mm-hmm. That's where David had tended the sheep of his father.
But wasn't it kind of a small town? Kind of like
200 people.
Like Geraldine? I mean, it would be like a king being born in Geraldine, Alabama, wouldn't it?
No, it was much smaller than Geraldine. No.
They had no red line.
What's that community up the road that I work?
Durham.
No, up further up. Between here and Rainsville, Lake something.
Lakeview.
Uh-huh. I think I organized that in 67. Uh-huh. And I don't think there's more than 75 or 80 people live there.
So that's why it would seem, I mean, you would think like New York.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, Bethlehem at the outside, the very outside, had 300 people. Mm-hmm. So they say, well, it was the city of David, and it would be expected that the Jews would say, well, that's where the Messiah is going to be born. Well, nobody considers that 750 years ago, before Christ, it's 900 and some odd years now, but 750 years ago, the prophet Micah prophesied that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. Now, how could a man like that come up with that? How could the other prophets uh, say the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
So these guys 1,000 years before Jesus is born say he's going to be born. And they talk about the circumstances around his birth. And if you read close enough some of the old prophecies, they don't actually mention it per se, but from Nazareth it was 90 miles uphill to Bethlehem.
Mm-hmm.
Bethlehem was about maybe 2,020 feet above sea level. And wherever Nazareth was, we really don't know, but it was down in the valley, and it was 90 miles away from what they've identified as Nazareth now. And it was uphill all the way. Now, here's this 15-year-old girl with this 31-year-old man walking 90 miles, take them 5 days. She's pregnant. Can you imagine how hard that trip was on that woman? And she's just a teenager, 15 years old.
Going uphill.
Uphill all the way. There ain't no level ground. It's uphill all the way. And, you know, travel in those days was considered the worst thing in the world for a person to do. Most people, if they had to travel as much as 30 miles, would get all their affairs in order and line everything up in case they didn't come back.
Because there were robbers out and
brigands, they called them, and everything.
Almost like now.
yeah, just about it. So anyway, if you take the prophecy that says that Jesus is going to come at the crossroads of the world, this is when he came. The world was better when Jesus Christ was born than it is now. Now, that don't mean you had all the gadgets you got now. Remember, they had television, they just hadn't found it. They could go to the moon, they just hadn't gone yet. So, and the funny thing about it is, and I think I've said this before, future generations will say the same thing about us. If the world is still standing 1,000 years from now, here's a prediction I'll give you. People will travel on magnetism.
Mm-hmm. No doubt.
And of course, by then, all of our minerals will have been exploited, so we will have to have magnetism to get around, and we'll harness it. There's no idea what magnetism is, you know. We can talk about it and say, well, if I have a magnet, put it over here, a nail will jump over to it. Mm-hmm. Well, the nail jumps and you put the magnet, but what happened to whatever it was that was between the nail and the magnet? Mm-hmm.
You can find this because you were on the show talking about this, I think about 3 years ago, you were talking about that.
Yeah.
And so you can go back into Facebook and just type Bob's name in, and Afternoon Drive Home, you'll be able to find that segment.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. It's still out there.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Speaking of magnetism.
Yeah, well, magnetism amazes me. Mm-hmm. So does gravity. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows what gravity is. They know what gravity does. We don't know what gravity is. When the apple fell out of the apple tree on, what's his name?
Newton.
Yeah, head. Mm-hmm. And he named it gravity, Isaac Newton. The question is, what was between the apple and when it hit him? What is that? Nobody knows. So it's just like time. Nobody knows what time is.
I think all this stuff could happen before you think, because, as you know, with technology and things that are happening, it's almost like a tailspin now. It's like, you know, a snowball going down the mountain. It's more and more and more every day. It's like in the technology world, you can't know it all because it keeps changing.
Oh,
It changes like
yeah,
not just
but
daily, but several times a day.
you have to remember, with what they knew at the time Jesus was born, it was the same.
Mhm.
Things were changing. Um, the next thing I was going to talk about is in the days of Caesar Augustus.
Mhm.
Augustus was building roads. He had created taxation. The Roman Empire, and I really hate to jump to it this quick, but the Roman Empire, when Jesus was born, was the crossroads of history. We look back on all those people and think they were dumb. We're the ones who are dumb.
I think so too.
They weren't dumb. They lived happy lives. They didn't have all these medicines we put in ourselves. They didn't have these automobiles running around stinking up everything. Uh, they lived happily, very simply. And we won't look back and say, oh, that was nothing. Let me tell you something. Mark Antony, well, I hesitate to get into this really quick because I still want to talk a little bit more about the fact that Jesus was totally predictable. I mean, and he came at just the right time. The Roman Empire, the way Augustus ran it, was you could be yourself and you could have your government and you could do whatever you wanted to as free people, but you had to pay Rome's tax and you had to stay out of trouble.
Hmm.
Now you start a bunch of junk, and here comes the Roman legion, and they took no prisoners. When they came to town, you knew it was trouble. And so he was very generous that way. And all of the emperors are no, not emperors, consuls. The consul was the president of the Senate. That was the government. And it lasted over 760 years. And we think we're something because we've been here, what, 265 years? And we're falling apart. We are literally falling apart. Where's Augustus Caesar when you need him?
Well, let's think about houses. Okay, so we bought the house my grandparents. They bought this whole farm back in 1938. But this is a better built house than if I went because we thought about toying with the idea of fixing this one up or just building one. And I said, I just want to fix this one up. Now, sometimes I think, what was I thinking? But I mean, the walls, you can actually nail something on a wall in this house. It's several layers of wall.
Well,
Shiplap in
I
it too.
tell you,
They were
we
built to
have it
last
made
then.
to a degree, but I see society today couldn't hold a candle to Rome
Mm-mm.
because we're not going to last
I
767
don't think
years.
so either.
The way we're going right now, we won't last another 50 years. This way, opening the border
That's
is,
internal suicide there.
is insane. Because what's going to happen, and I hate to talk like this, but because we need to be talking about Christmas, when they get all these people in here who can't speak the language, everybody wants the white man's treasure because we work hard and we think and we build. And so the Hispanics are coming by the thousands, I mean, tens of thousands. 2 years from now, they're going to be taking the jobs away from our lower income people. That's going to be a problem. They're going to take housing away from them. The running around here wanting reparations. You better be hoping you have a place to live in 20 years because this is going to be madness. We're going to have intense crime.
Chaos like we've never seen.
Yeah, but we're having chaotic lives now
Mhm.
with these district attorneys that won't punish criminals. I mean, a guy runs up and hits another guy in the head with a baseball bat, and everybody sees it. And if his head had been a baseball, it would have gone over the shortstop. So
Know that.
but the guy just barely stayed alive. And what does this guy get?
Slap.
He got $7,500 bond, which he signed himself, and didn't have any money and no job, and didn't stay in jail 24 hours. And this was not his first time. Anyway, I want to still go back and talk about Christmas.
Bob, we need to go ahead and go into a commercial break. And
Go
we'll be
ahead.
right back in just a few minutes. Y'all hang in there, okay? The Hatter Cafe and Country Inn is nestled in the northeast corner of Alabama the Beautiful in the delightful town of Mentone. We're located on top of scenic Lookout Mountain near Little River and DeSoto State Park and located only 5 minutes from shopping and restaurants. There is also a nearby community walking path and golf course. We welcome everyone through the doors and we are committed to outstanding service for all guests. At the Hatter Cafe and Country Inn, we invite people from all walks of life to come and get away from it all, enjoy the open spaces, treetop views, fresh, clean air, and experience Southern hospitality at its finest. We look forward to hosting you. To reserve a special event, or if you would love a special getaway at the Country Inn, you can call us at 256-634-2018. Twin City Used Car Sales has been serving drivers in the Northeast Alabama area for years with a quality selection of late model used cars, SUVs, and pickup trucks. On top of our extensive selection and competitive prices, we offer professional auto financing services for used car buyers of all credit levels. Whether you've just begun your search or you're ready to secure your next vehicle, at Twin City Used Car Sales, you will drive away with the vehicle of your dreams. The sales and finance staff at Twin City Used Car Sales look forward to serving you. And you can apply for financing online before your visit to our used dealership in Fort Payne and Gadsden, Alabama. Check us out on the web at TwinCityUsedCars.com or go by the locations in Fort Payne and Gadsden. We sincerely look forward to serving you. Patterson's Music and Jewelry is a full-line music store offering guitar repair, setup and sound installation equipment, as well as instrument rentals and new and used guitars and amps. We offer jewelry at affordable prices and jewelry repair, watch batteries and link removal, and we offer personalized jewelry such as fingerprint, mother's rings, and pendants. Shop in historic downtown Fort Payne on Galt Avenue. Hours are 9 to 5 Monday through Friday and 9 to 2 on Saturday. Call 256-845-4115. That's 256-845-4115. And thank you for trusting Patterson's Music and Jewelry. We are back. I got to tell you, I love that guitar music with this last commercial of Patterson. You got to go check them out, by the way. Very good, dear friends. And they have a lot of churches around here with their sound equipment and stuff like that. So go check them out.
Oh, I'm a country music fan. It's so funny. My oldest daughter's an opera singer.
Yeah, I thought about that. Yeah. How did that happen?
I don't know. But I don't know. My class prophecy of the class of 52 at Decatur High School was Robert French was picking and singing at the Grand Ole Opry.
Oh, you could
Anyway.
like Hank Williams.
Yeah, let's get back to what I came here for, to talk about Christmas and things you don't know. And I hope that I've clarified Zacharias for our audience, because he was a very important man in history. The father of John the Baptist. And John the Baptist, as Jesus said, there's no man ever greater than John the Baptist. and there wasn't. And it's so sad that Herod cut his head off over a dance of a girl named
Another
Salome.
woman. What is
I'm
this?
telling you. Anyway, I have in this book that I've written on the real story of Christmas. I haven't published it yet, but chapter 4 is entitled "In the Days of Caesar Augustus." Everybody who is familiar with Christmas knows that it all begins with that sentence. In the days of Caesar Augustus, all the world was to be taxed. What they were doing, they called it tax, and they had to pay a tax, but they were really taking a census to find out who was where. Remember, Caesar didn't care what you did, as long as you were peaceful, honest, and paid your taxes. Don't do that, and here comes the legion, and it ain't gonna be pretty.
That's just something about the word taxes, you know.
Yeah,
It still resonates now.
But anyway, it says in the days of Caesar Augustus. Well, I wonder who knows who Caesar Augustus really was. He was the first emperor of Rome following the Republic. The Republic, which had been a shining star for hundreds of years, total freedom, honest taxation, people elected senators who were honest. And lo and behold,
back in the day, they actually elected senators who were honest.
Yes, they did that, and some were appointed, some were wealthy and bought their positions, but they all worked for the good of the people until they found out they could dip their hand in the public treasury and they could get away with it. And that's where we are today. And so when they started that, it began to implode. And what happened was it was called the Roman Republic, and the Republic failed. The landlords, to make more money, built houses on top of each other and rented them. One of the writers said that Rome is made out of matchsticks. And every now and then they'd have a fire and kill 8,000 people. So the Republic failed. We had Mark Antony having a group. Cassius had a group. Various other generals had groups around the empire, and they were fighting with each other to get control of the Republic. Well, Julius Caesar was Augustus' great uncle. And of course, we all know how Shakespeare made Julius Caesar famous with when they assassinated him and his best friend Brutus stuck his knife in him and he said, "Et tu, Brute," you too, Brutus. And so that was the way the society had devolved down. And we had these people fighting on various fronts. Augustus Caesar had his first public experience when he was 12 years old, and he was a speaker at his grandmother's funeral. Now, all until recently, all through time, funeral speeches have been some of the most important things that were ever done. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address just comes to mind immediately. And they've sort of faded now. And I've been fortunate enough to make a few funeral speeches. And nobody remembers them, but it was nice to say those things about somebody who had passed away and comment on things. Anyway, he did that, and then he said to his family, I'm going to Rome. They lived in the mountains. His father was a senator. So at age 15, he went to Rome. And his uncle Julius died in the assassination. And he left everything he owned to his only heir, Augustus Caesar. And he wanted them to make him consul. Now, the reason Julius was so important, he had been one of the most successful Roman senators. And he rose to consul, which meant he's like our president. And he was just the world's greatest hero because he had conquered whatever needed to be conquered. For example, Spain. He went in and took Spain. The only thing he couldn't conquer was what was called Germanicus, Germany.
Okay.
Well, eventually Augustus did that. So anyway, these groups were fighting each other, and Augustus asked Mark Antony to give him his inheritance. And he wouldn't do it. He's using it to make his, to fund his army. And he had a whole bunch of ships. He had more ships than any of the other people who were fighting him and fighting each other. And so Augustus told him he could have the money if he'd let him borrow the ships. So he let him borrow the ships, and he wouldn't give them back to him. So while that was going on, Antony and Cleopatra committed suicide. And the Battle of Actium, Augustus won it walking away. And even though Augustus couldn't give the soldiers their pension and place to live, he promised it to them. So he returned to Rome a conquering hero. And because Caesar had been so popular, the Senate voted him a god. And he said, I am not a god, but I am the Son of God. Uh-oh, here we go. Isn't that amazing? Julius Caesar says he's the Son of God. Now, the people believed it and put him into their prayer ritual.
Even back then, people will believe anything the media spews out.
I'm telling you, it's a sad situation. So anyway, now that Caesar is dead, and Octavius, who is Augustus, you know, we have 2 months named after him, August and October. So, and they wanted to name the whole year after him. He wouldn't do it. Tell you what kind of guy he was, I'll divert just a little bit. He was only 5 feet 5 inches tall. Little bitty guy. I've got a life-size bust of him in my office because I admire him so much. He became the most successful ruler in the world, and they wanted him to be king. He said, no, we're going back to the Republic where you're going to rule. So they wanted him to be emperor. He said, no, I'm not going to take it. We're going back to the Republic. So they said, well, what will you take? Are you the Son of God? He said, I'm not the Son of God. He said, but I will take the title of first citizen of Rome. He said, I'm your first citizen. Isn't that nice that you finally have somebody of the nature and character of George Washington who said, I don't want the power and I don't want to be president. And here he does the same thing hundreds of years before. And so Augustus was the first citizen of Rome.
I want to ask you a question, and this is about, you know, statues and things like that. Okay, back in that day, they've done a lot of reconstruction on bones and things, and the statues you see of, say, Caesar, it really didn't look like that. They made them look better than they actually were, kind of like we do on
Well, of course,
television.
you know, they had makeup, but not to the extent that you can rebuild your face.
But when they erected a statue of them, the statue didn't really look like them.
Well, to a degree, before I came here, I looked at an artist rendering of Augustus, and it was pretty much a likeness when he was in his 30s.
Mm.
But Augustus, uh, what he did was, once he had turned the chaos around and made the republic, first thing he did was kick the landlords out if they didn't rebuild honest housing for the citizens. The second thing he did was make the employers pay an honest wage to the people working. Then, to keep the people happy, he built the stadium where they could have the games. It was already under construction.
Have you been there?
I have walked by it.
I would love to go.
It's just a hunk of junk.
Yeah, but I'd love to go anyway.
Well,
I love old construction.
Well, I was impressed.
Mhm.
But
To not have the machines and to not have the technology back then, they were masterpieces.
yeah, but the most impressive thing is the roads.
I know.
Augustus was the first emperor to build roads, and he built a viaduct that transferred water from South Italy to Rome,
Mhm.
which was amazing, and that allowed them to have baths.
Mhm.
He's just a great guy.
Ahead of his time, basically.
And you know, he died. I have it written here. He died about. I wish I could find it. Anyway, he died about 15 years before Christ was born. But well, I'm incorrect on that. 6 years before Christ was born, because the writer of Luke says, in the days of Caesar Augustus, when Quirinius was the governor of Syria. Quirinius was the governor of Syria after Christ was born, or at the time, and Augustus had been dead about 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was
You
looking.
were talking about the roads, though. It would be wonderful to know if Eisenhower actually did a study on him for the interstate system we have now.
Well, Eisenhower graduating West Point, he had to do a study on it. You had, if you go to.
But he takes credit for it. It was really Caesar.
Well, let me tell you the secret behind what Eisenhower did. Mm-hmm. In building the interstates, every interstate he built, every 50 miles had to have 10,000 feet of flat runway. Mm-hmm. So the interstate is really airport runways in case we have war.
No doubt. Go to Charlotte, North Carolina during peak time, people going home.
Well, it's
you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. The whole idea here is, if we have to fight somebody and they come over here and bomb our airports, we've got our interstates that we can land on. Mm-hmm. That was the purpose of the interstate. I was trying to find where he actually, I found this note that in 33 BC, 33 years before Jesus was born, he actually won the wars with Mark Antony and Cleopatra and all their successors. Yeah.
And Cleopatra was a businesswoman, wasn't she?
Oh, she was unbelievable. Let's not get into her.
Let's do that for Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
That'd be a great one.
Yeah, I like what she did to attract Julius Caesar.
What'd you do?
She got buck naked and they rolled her up in a beautiful Persian rug and he was in the room and they went in and threw the rug on the floor and she rolls out buck naked. You tell me she wasn't something?
She's something else, but she was a businesswoman. I mean, she sold salts
Oh,
and
she
just
was,
all kinds of.
yeah, I
She
could,
didn't just. People think she just laid around on a couch all day long, but she was actually a businesswoman.
one of the things I wanted to point out for your audience is that in 19 BC, Augustus made peace with the Parthians. And they were the last people that were holding out. They were beyond Israel, beyond the Middle East. They were the people of the sunset. And they were Iran and Iraq and those places. Anyway, they were the last people that he conquered. And it was when he was 44 years old, he completed the subjugation of the empire. Now he's going to die in his 60s. And he was a very sick man. And
So what was wrong with him? Was he sickly his
well,
entire
his
life?
teeth had fallen out. He had bad eyesight. He had a bad digestive system. He had constant kidney trouble. He couldn't sleep. He had a chronic cough. He had breathing problems. So he was.
You think he smoked like some kind of tobacco or something? 'Cause that sounds like, emphysema and
I don't
similar to
know.
that.
At the time Jesus was born, he had quit participating in government. And what he did is he had soldiers carry him around, and he went around the empire to visit all the people in the Roman Empire. He'd freed them now, and they were electing their leaders, and everybody's got free speech and all the stuff that we have. And he wanted to go around and see it as working. And everywhere he went, he tuned up the government. And what he did is, if he caught a guy who was a crook, kill him. That was the end of that. And so it didn't take but one or two of those, and the crooks disappeared.
Yeah, I guess so. He meant business.
Yeah.
That's what we need more of now, is people who mean business,
Yeah, this was written by the poet Juvenal, and going back to what he did for Rome. Rome is supported on pipe stems and matchsticks. It's cheaper, so for the landlord to shore up his ruins, patch up the old cracked walls, and notify the tenants they can sleep secure, though the beams are in ruins above them.
Was that an early form of population control? Do you think?
I don't think
Did it
so.
stem from that?
I don't
But
know.
for a whole building to go up and a bunch of people die.
Well, but they weren't for that. That came out of selfishness when the Republic collapsed. I go through this government all the way down to Nero and what they did, what the various consuls did. But without a doubt, Augustus was the best. He had consolidated all of his power. It took him 28 years. He did that. And because he built the roads and made the baths, and they even had hot water in the baths.
The women would really appreciate that.
Huh?
We would appreciate that.
Yeah, well, the baths, the water would come from the aqueduct.
They were like spas, like the most massive
go
spa
down
ever.
into the tub, and the tub would hold about 100, 150 people. and they had people, slaves, up on the top, burning the rocks to keep them hot.
How would you like that job? What do you do for a living?
Yeah, but it was in 5 AD that Augustus decided he'd take a census of the empire. In 6 AD, in so doing, he would collect a poll tax. And what he did was he set up a spoil system. Now, Nicodemus was, no, Matthew was a tax collector. What happened is the tax collector could get 10% of the taxes he collected, but he had to pay it to his supervisor, and the supervisor would get 5%. And the supervisor paid it to his thing, and he'd get 2%, and then the remainder would go to Rome.
Sounds like a racket to me.
Well, it was a system that worked. And when you didn't have telephones and telegraphs and things going at the speed of light, it was pretty good. And Quirinius, who's mentioned for Christmas, had proven his unwavering loyalty to Augustus, and he was rewarded by being the governor of Syria. Now, and that included Palestine. So in 5 AD, Augustus and Quirinius was then, well, let me put it this way. In 5 AD, when they say Augustus had the census and the taxes, Jesus was born in 4 BC. And it can't be said whether it was May 20th or April 20th. Anyway, he was born in 4 BC. We've established that. And the census that took place by Quirinius was 10 years later. So there's a lot of problems with putting it all together, because the book of Luke is probably the first gospel that was written and probably the most accurate, but it was not written until 30 years after Jesus was crucified. So you have these problems.
So there had to be some losses in the translation getting to that
point. The translators are horrible. The worst thing in our Bible that translator did, in my judgment, was they quoted Jesus that if your brother sins against you, you should not sin against him. And the translator put in, without just cause. Jesus didn't say that.
Well, I could do anything, say, well, it's just cause.
Right, that's right. So anyway, I guess we've covered very, very briefly Augustus in the days of Caesar Augustus.
You've got a little bit over 5, just under 6 minutes left.
Well, what do you want to talk about with Christmas? We've in the years past, we've done all the angels, and we've done the wise men, and we've done the shepherds, and we've done the inn. We've done, and today I've done Augustus. We could talk about the Shem Sham Inn, where there was no room.
Let's talk about that.
Well, the Shem Sham Inn was about 300 feet long, and it was built in a modified triangle with 2 wings on each end. It was 3 stories high. A room was 20 by 20, and every room had an open door and had a window to get air through. In the center of the inn, downstairs in the grounds, was a central feeding area and a watering area for the animals. Now,
but it's in the center part of it. That seems a lot.
All the innkeeper provided was the building. If you wanted to eat, You had to bring your own food and cook it.
It's like we're having to do now with the employee shortage.
If you wanted to sleep comfortable with a blanket, you had to bring it.
Bring your own.
You bring it. And getting a bath was out of the question. But if you wanted a drink of water, you could go down to where the cattle were, because the water down there came out of a trough and for the cattle.
Mhm.
Now, most rich people got rooms on the top floor, and there were probably at least 20 rooms on the top floor. The thing was 3 stories high, so there were 60 rooms. Now, down on the base, the distance between the first floor and the ground was about 2 feet, because once you step off the little walkway that went around it, you're walking in cow manure or horse manure or ox manure, and it was just a stinking filthy place. But
That's why you want on the toppest floor.
right, if you had an oxen, if you were wealthy enough to own an oxen, you had a servant sleep in the floor on the first floor, and he took the oxen in the room with him.
Oh my goodness.
But now this inn flourished for 400 years, and it was the jumping off place from Israel to Egypt. 300 people lived there mostly, and most all of them were kin to each other, since it was the city of David. And the inn was very famous because there were no other inns. Now, at the time Jesus was born, the city was so crowded, there was no room at the inn. But the innkeeper's going to make what he can, and he remembered a cave that was near the inn, which they had a stable in it for special people. And he, because the woman, the child, she was 15 years old, maybe 14, was so pregnant and she was in labor, he took them down to this cave, this stable. And there was a trough in it that had been cut out of a hewn rock, where you put the feed for the cattle. And when she had the baby, he was laid there in swaddling clothes. Now, she brought the swaddling clothes, which were just rags. She brought them to wrap the baby, because traditionally when a woman had a baby, after the cord was cut and everything was halfway cleaned up, she took care of wrapping and cleaning the baby. So he was kind enough to take them down there, but the houses were flat roofs, and every house sold 3 feet of flat roof for you to sleep on. So you got a house that's 30 feet wide. If you've got to go, I'll shut up. But
You're going to have to go in about a minute. You do need to tell folks how they can find your books.
do I?
You need to tell folks how they can find your books.
Which one?
All of them. You go to Amazon, right?
Amazon. I'm on Amazon.com, and they're $20 each. And of course, we have a few copies. People wanted them. I've got a Christmas book out that I put out last year. That's really good. And then,
You can get in contact with me too, and then I can find him.
yeah.
So
Well, we're
you'll
going.
get a book.
I will. We're coming out with 2 new books in the next 30 days, and I'm thinking really about putting this out in pamphlet form.
Oh, that'd be great.
Anyway, it's been fun. I hope somebody enjoyed it.
I think so. Absolutely. And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
Hope you
And
have an awesome one.
Merry Christmas, and God bless everybody.
Yeah. And we're going to bring him in on Valentine's Day. We're going to talk about Cleopatra.
Oh boy,
That's going to be a good one. Some of it you might, never mind. You take care. We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.